Well. Alrighty. I'm not 1,000% sure where to start with with my thoughts on this game or where I want to go. But let me reduce the volume here. Um, okay. So in regards to the end, um, I think the end was, you know, it did what it needed to do, I guess. I still think it's unbelievably strange and awkward and weird for Dingo to be the final boss. It just it's so silly uh, when you think about it like that. But you know, it is what it is. Uh, so yeah, Trails Through Daybreak 2 conquered. My first impressions, which were based off of day 1 through 3. Before going through the game, I accidentally read something that said this game was filler. So my mentality going into this is sort of waiting for the moment when I know nothing matters. I'm somewhat excited to see the timeline mechanic take shape. I hope its system doesn't require retreading content. I don't like the implementation of the Martian Garden at the moment. It feels forced and unnecessary. I just want to roll with the same homies and do something meaningful and fun. Don't Reverie Corridor or Phantasmagoria me, please. Interestingly enough, I think combat is less fun because of the S-Crass limits and nerfs they've implemented. It really does feel like balancing S-Crafts is going to be an ongoing issue for the series. And those are my first impressions. For my overall thoughts, I actually wrote down a little blurb for it because I thought it kind of fit nicely. But before I uh, give my overall thoughts, this was a viewer requested game. And if I remember correctly, this was requested by Happy Chocobro. I'm going to double check here. Yep. So thank you very much for the recommendation, Happy Chocobro. For my overall thoughts, I have a formulaic journey where the cast of characters contains some extremely intelligent people constantly and consistently find themselves doing stupid things and or conveniently losing their usefulness when they can solve the mystery. That is my synopsis of Trails Through Daybreak 2. And my overall thoughts are like the the game itself is fine. Like it's a Trails game. It does what Trails games do. It even adds a few couple of twists in turns. Hey, Digital Hearts. Onto like various types of gameplay and style that they're approaching things and certain um approaches to how they've done things in the past and whatnot. Like there's there's some really interesting things that this game has done, and there's these really interesting things that this game has done to kind of like separate itself from other Trails games. And for a lot of those things, you know, those are really cool. But here's the thing. If when I go to play a Trails game, I'm going to play it for the story because like the gameplay is more or less the same throughout all of the Trails games out there. Like they all play similarly enough. The Daybreak games offered a decently to large departure. Um, but you know they're still playing the same, so not much to worry about there. Feel like we're gonna get a okay, no end credit scene. Got an achievement for completing the finale. Uh, I'll save the clear data first because I could always uh, fail to power can go out or something. So yeah, I think this approach went went about things in a fine manner for the gameplay because it's more or less going to be what it is. The problem just comes with the story. Um, or for everything that I like about the Trails games, where there's this large continuous story and there's these characters that keep making appearances and they're all like pushing together this narrative on this continent and it's all coming to a head or what could be like a finale greatest hits trilogy or something like that. Like the prospects of that are so nice. But it just all comes crashing down when it comes to execution of the story, in my opinion, and how they utilize characters to push the story forward. Um, like I mentioned, it it's really silly for the final boss of this game to be Dingo. And like I feel like that's kind of an important criticism to have. It's like this is the second game of likely a trilogy of games for the Calvard arc, and we're spending these moments fighting Dingo. Um, I feel like there's so much left unsaid and left to do in the Calvard region, and um, I don't know. I guess I'm fighting the gardens in the first Daybreak game felt fine to me. But as soon as like it started to feel like they were bringing back the gardens in this game, I kind of started losing interest because it's kind of annoying to say, yeah, we wiped out this entire organization. They're gone. We don't have to worry about them anymore. And then in the next game, they're like, oh no, actually, here's a couple remnants that are still around. It's like, come on, uh, don't tell me one thing and then just retcon it in the next game and do something else. And sure, there can always be remnants, running around and stuff like that. Um, but approach it that way. Say, hey, we did our best, but a couple of them got away. Maybe they said that and I forgot. Who knows? I'm just saying. So when the garden master kind of revealed himself, I was kind of disappointed in that and kind of deflated the story. And I, I I will say that I don't think this game felt like filler to me, and so that like little spoiler that I read, um, to me felt wrong. But I can definitely say that I don't feel like a lot of the events in this game did feel important. Um, and when important events did happen, they were not expanded upon in enough detail. Catra being this, um, super angel person that can destroy the world, I feel like we could have spent a good while working on that and trying to understand and delve deep into that and how Catra's going to uh, approach that particular scenario. But that was just kind of like a one and done kind of thing. Um, I always want to see more Ouroboros members involved. To me, it feels like Ouroboros is the centerpiece of the Trails games. They're the ones that get all the cogs moving to where the story needs to go. And it whenever their presence is not in the games as heavily, I do feel like they kind of suffer for it. That being said, Harwood is a boss. I really like Harwood's character. Um, that also being said, I don't necessarily like the utilization of Harwood in this game. I don't know. This is a long-winded way of, in my overall thought section, of just saying, the game is a Trails game. If you love Trails games, you're probably going to like this one. But I did not enjoy it all too much. I think, in my opinion, this might be one of the weakest Trails games out there. Um, Trying to think which one is worse than this one, but I don't know. I don't know if I want to. I don't know if I'm prepared to technically say this is the worst Trails game so far, but it. I would say that it's down there. Um, it, yeah. For me, I would say it's down there. For story, was it satisfying? I'm gonna say no on this one. Again, the final boss was Dingo. What's satisfying about that? We did get a nice, cameo from the person that Manadride has been wanting for a super long time, and so that was really nice to see him pop up. Did it feel complete? Um, I, I will say that there's a nice bit of completeness here. We got to finally get the eighth Genesis, and there's a couple of threads still to pull on. But where the third game will go, who knows? This whole warning from Professor Epstein about, you know, 20x or 12 0x or whatever, who knows what they're going to do with that. How was the pacing? Uh, this is a weird one because like the pacing is kind of better than most Trails games out there. Um, I think I can reasonably say that we did not spend as much time mowing the lawn in this game as we did in other games. And that means a lot to me because I speak about mowing the lawn a lot. So I really appreciate that about this game. The problem is that this game to me takes after a system from another game, but still makes the same mistakes and pitfalls of that game. And it doesn't do it as well as that game either. And so that really hurts the experience here because going down a plot line and then hitting a point where you just die and then you have to start all over and then you have to go do whatever it is you have to go do to do the new plot line. That's to me is just not a fun interaction to do. Um, I would rather see the scenarios in front of me and make decisions on what I feel is the correct way to go about presenting and achieving the future that I want. And if I make a mistake along the way and I have to restart, that feels way more acceptable to me than choosing the only path that is available, getting to the end, dying, and then having to restart again and choose the right path. Um, so, because of that, I feel like it makes the pacing like significantly worse. And that's just where I stand with that one. So, is this game for Sugafus? Well, there's plenty of Sugafus out there. There's plenty of them that play these games. So, and as much as I would hate to admit it, I'm a Sugafoo as well. Also, what was that weird Anya's confession, non confession? I don't remember what you mean by that. We had a theory going in the first Daybreak game that Anya's was the villain, and like I wasn't on board with that for a long time, and then towards the end, I was on board with that, and I'm still on board with that. So we'll see how that plays out. For my thoughts on the story, having been introduced to what I assume will be the villain for the entire game, I'm not very invested in them. I played a game not that long ago where the antagonist said less than 5 words for the entire game, and that character had nothing else going on for them. This Red Grendel needs to find some compelling villain traits and quick. Then I have under that, turns out the Crimson Grendel is not the air quotes main villain. It's instead the Garden Master, who is definitely far more compelling and interesting, even breaks a number of Trails tropes, such as showing his face, introducing himself early in the Trails game, and whatever else I'm forgetting. Well, I would have to add an addendum to that. Turns out the Grendel is actually, the main villain slash antagonist for this one. Maybe not necessarily in a traditional sense, but in the sense of like the world's gonna end if you don't stop this guy. Even though the Garden Master had that too. She said something about she wanted to share her feelings with the one special person, but she didn't. They've been going about the whole Anya's loves Van thing for a long time, so I think they're just talking about that. Also, turns out the Garden Master never showed his real face until then. I wrote this, many days before yesterday. Today's what, day 19, 18 or something like that? Beat this game way sooner than I thought, by the way. Thought this was going to be a 120-hour game. To see this be a 73-hour Trails game, I appreciate it. Uh, Trails through Daybreak 1 felt like a Trails greatest hits type of game, and I'm getting that feeling from this game as well, perhaps even more so. I don't know if I would necessarily agree with this one. They had moments in here, but not as significant as Trails of Daybreak 1. Every time we help Heyaway, seems like the world gets worse and we do it anyway. This I have a really big problem with. Um, there's there's so many scenarios in the Daybreak games themselves, but I think this expands into some of the other Trails games where we help the villains because we're put in a scenario where if we don't help the villains, then we think something bad will happen because of it. But the problem is that they're the villains and we're volunteering to help them. If we help them because we were manipulated, that's one thing. But we really need to stop putting ourselves in situations where it's like, well, if we don't help Heyaway, they won't have a monopoly on crime in the entire country, and therefore other criminals out there will just have more free reign to be criminals. it it doesn't make any sense to me. And I'm really tired of being put into situations like that. We need to stop helping Hayaway because every time we help Hayaway, it blows up in our face. Sick of it. The Fragments chapter revolving around Nemeth Island is without a doubt one of my least favorite moments. First, our reason for even going makes no sense. Someone who we suspect is Harwood sends us an invitation to an island resort, and we just go. No discussion about how ridiculous the idea is, how dangerous Harwood is, how he can't be trusted, or verifying the information is good or trustworthy, or anything of the sort. I stand by this. The characters spent time relaxing on the island despite knowing that Harwood is dangerous. The guy literally kills people with poison traps and nobody seems to care or think anything suspicious is going on. Still stand by this. I probably stand by all this, actually. Everyone and their mamas was invited for no reason at all other than to fabricate this absurd idea that Van is working with Harwood because people saw them drive away uh, side by side in a boat. This was insane to me. Um, One of the most insane things I've it it makes no sense. Like there has never been a scenario where Van has willingly worked with Harwood or anybody in Ouroboros, um, like to the point where they were working together to do something nefarious. Like in any of the scenarios where they would be working together, it was always a reluctant partnership that was a means to an end, but never involved anything nefarious. You know, like the games in Arassian, for example. Unfortunately, I did not get to team up with them, but if we had teamed up, presumably I could see it going where, we're just doing that to finish the game because we have to, or else everybody dies. Um, so for everybody just to immediately come to the conclusion, oh, Van and crew is working with them, so we have to stop them. It's just so stupid. So unbelievably stupid. And it's just another one of those examples of the characters in this game present themselves to be so intelligent, and then you just knock down their IQ off a freaking cliff so that you could fabricate this scenario where we have to fight everybody. Oh my gosh, it bothers me so much. Then, in the biggest I told you so moment, Harwood discloses what he wants done, and nobody makes any attempts to subvert the plan and just goes along with his evil scheme. Here's another uh, problem where it's like, at least in Trails Through Daybreak 1, we were looking for loopholes and things like that to allow us to break the rules or bend the rules so that we can do various things. In this case, we're just like, oh, he threatened us. I guess there's nothing we can do about it. And it blows my mind. It blows my mind. Again, like just such a reduction in mental faculty for all the characters. And only when it's convenient. Introducing that the twins are children of Dante's was a little disappointing, only because it feels like it was done to bring back a nuke for that one fight. While I doubt it will happen, I hope that detail becomes story relevant. It was not story relevant. This one was definitely a pull a rabbit out of a hat so that we can, uh, you know, have a a threatening moment that people will have to worry about, but never amounted to anything and it just felt silly. Then at the end, he reveals this was all done to help Ren, which, sure, that's cool, but I just spent around 12 hours in the chapter, and most of it was flailing around when Ren wasn't even around or involved. Um, I have something more about this in two more points, but um, if if we're gonna have a story revolve around someone, at least put that person in the party for the entirety of the story that revolves around them, and then make the entire time that we're engaging in that story to be about them, revolving around them, learning about them. Don't just make it so that we do all this nonsense and then in the final 50 lines of dialogue, it's like, oh yeah, this was about Ren the entire time. It was about Ren. It was about Ren. It bothers me. The Swin betrayal was cool though. Props for that. Never saw it coming. I double props for that. I did call the whole, he's gonna come back thing. That one was super obvious. But yeah, when Swin getting the upper hand on us, that was nice. Something that came to me that I actually found really annoying was the usage of Ren. In a game where we have a new cast of characters, all of which could use more character development and personality, we get a super long chapter that's ultimately about Ren, someone who had more than enough screen time in the other games. So this is something that I think a lot of the Trails games, uh, not a lot, but like some of the more newer Trails games have problems with. In Daybreak 1, we have Fee, and Fee is more like of a guest character, but like she has more shine than she probably should have. In this game, we have, at least the game is telling us that an entire intermission fragment sequence is all about Ren. And it's like, this could have been all about Catra, who's actually had a very important moment that is never touched on ever again, by the way. Like within the story, they mention it a couple of times and he just randomly has his wings out a couple of times. But um, like it should have been all about Catra. And that would have been very meaningful to explore those circumstances with Catra and Catra coming to terms with all of that. And instead, that is just a footnote to, oh yeah, I just wanted to help you out, Ren, get over some of your past trauma. Never mind that you had appearances in Trails in the Sky and the Crossbell games and the Cold Steel games and Trails into Reverie. It's like Ren has been in uh, every country and has been involved in some capacity in every story. Like, we need to leave Ren out of the main narrative and start moving on to developing these new characters that you have. Because, you know, we don't really know a whole lot about Anya's. There's not really a lot going on for Anya's. Not a lot going on for Aaron. There's not a lot going on for Farida. Like every single character in this party needs to have an arc of their own beyond that initial introduction arc. Um, Aaron is the freaking tyrant, and like, what does that mean for Aaron? Does the tyrant ever come back? Can he ever manifest the tyrant again? Like, can we start exploring some of these interesting things that are going on with him? Can we work with Farida's um, Jaeger Corps and, learn a little bit more about her culture and how she's supposed to interact with them and things like that. Go on some missions with some Jaegers. There's so much to explore with these characters, and it's all wasted. And then we just get one about Ren, and it drives me insane. Can we go to Marduk headquarters, Rosette? Introduce us to some of your homies, your robot homies. If the chapter after Fragments is not having Nadia, if the chapter after Fragments is not us having Nadia's back as she scours the world looking for Swin, I'm going to be disappointed. I want us forcing Ren to tell us where Ouroboros is so that we can have them tell us where Harwood is so that we can get him to tell us how he contacted Ace. My next point. Life is hard. I admittedly didn't even consider that Nadia would just abandon us and we would be unable to keep up with her or find her. And I'm actually kind of disappointed that I did not see that coming, because that's like the Trail's way to do it, is to cut the character out completely and then to have you go mow the lawn. So I guess it's just been a while before I've played a Trails game, that I start forgetting these things. But man, if they did that, it would have been so great. I don't know if I have this. Oh, I do have this written down, but like, there's so many ways for us to get information, and as I'll get into in a couple of points, um, it's it's crazy that we never got anything out of it. The people following Van around everywhere he goes is unquestionably one of the most irritating things the series has done. Not only does it make no sense for them to do it, but they also show up at the moment we're about to gain some actual useful bits of information, ultimately preventing us from getting that information and wasting everyone's time. Uh, yeah, yeah. I mean, it even happened there at the very end. Um, this is probably just a me thing, but it's so irritating. A brother just can't go out and go get a hamburger by himself. He's got to have the entire squad watch him leave, and then they go track him down, and they show up at the burger spot, and they're like, "Oh, you're gonna go get a burger? You're not gonna invite any of us?" It's like, sucker, I can do whatever I want. You're not my babysitters. You ain't my mama. It's annoying, unbelievably annoying. Uh, and then maybe I could have sectioned these more properly, because, anyways, it really bothers me how pick and choosy the game can be when it comes to utilizing the full capacity of its characters. Van has associates with access to the highest and lowest tiers of information, and everyone struggles to find leads, push the plot forward, or just be helpful. Somehow, all of these characters and organizations just can't come through with useful information on Swin, Nadia, or the Garden Master. There's Ren, who can get information from Ouroboros. There's Renee Kincaid and Kilika from the Calvard Intelligence Division. There's Ferida and Shizuna from the Jaeger Corps. And in fact, Shizuna has the unclouded eye, which means that she can just see things that nobody else can see and make connections that nobody else even has the capacity to see. And we know for a fact that she was just hiding that stuff and she knew everything. Rosette from Marduk Industries, arguably the most powerful organization in the entire game that effectively knows literally everything. Elaine from the Bracers, who, to be fair, are typically pretty worthless, but they have their moments. There's Agnes's dad, who is literally the president of the country, and also has a way to contact Ouroboros, by the way. Judith is a phantom thief, and her mom and grandmother are legends in the world with crazy contacts. Celise and Leon are from the Gralsritter. Aaron can reach out to Hayaway, who basically owe us everything they can give and more because we're the reason they still exist. Van has a bunch of low tier contacts, such as like Bermati and stuff. Katra can't build us something to track the Genesis? You know, question mark? All of these people, and they can't do anything? They can't find any information? It blows my mind. And then we get to that point where, you know, after going through 4 or 5 sequences of going back in time and making no progress and learning no new information about what we're dealing with, suddenly we're just like, hey, you know, that information that we learned like 4 or 5 uh time travels ago, maybe we should do something about that. And then they move the plot forward and ah bothers me. Happy to see that Maxim's Crimson Corruption arc didn't revolve around Van in the same way the others did. Unfortunately, like literally every other one revolved around Van. It actually makes the Maxim one super, super strange. Um, I wonder why that one was just different like that. I mean, they could have had, instead of the other racer guy, could have just had Van be the guy that he wanted to kill, and that would have been crazy. And it would have been a really, like a really serious thing to explore too. But I guess they don't want that type of aura over Van, even if it is fake. So they give it to some guy. I think I can officially say that I don't like how time travel is implemented or treated in this game. Firstly, every timeline where we have to reset involves someone dying. Some of these characters are minor characters like Albert and Odette from Agnes's school or Maxim. In what appears to be many instances, going along the death route is required. There was a brief time on Nemeth Island where some of those could be avoided, but I haven't seen that since. There doesn't appear to be a way to go back in time at will. It seems like you're required to go through, go through, I guess, with the story arc, and then given the choice, you can only go to the next option for the story. For example, after Maxim dies, I can't go back to Nemeth Island or to Longport. In Act 3, there's a choice of investigating the Maxim plot or the church plot. I chose the church plot first, and at the end, I got a genesis for it. Then everyone dies, and we go back in time to the Maxim plot. The problem here is that we don't have the church plot genesis in that timeline. So how are they going to fix that? I'm presuming that shenanigans are going to be required, but I haven't run into the scenario yet as I'm writing this. Just as I finished the Maxim arc and haven't converged yet. And, you know, surprise, they never did explain that. This to me is the big problem with using time travel in video games. Is if you do not explain the rules of time travel, then you create problems that you cannot answer. And even when you try to answer them, they're never going to be sufficient enough. Honestly, I think there's probably maybe like less than 5 games out there that do time travel in a way that is satisfactory, and like the list of ones that do it well probably don't exist, and if they do exist, it's probably 1 or 2 games at most. um just stay away from time travel, especially stay away from time travel if you're not going to create the rules for the time travel and then stick to the rules for time travel. Like, you can't bend the rules, you can't break the rules. Once you establish the rules, you have to stick to those rules the entire time. And if you want to be clever about the rules, then you can do that. That's totally cool. But yeah, like step one is always establish the rules. I think I've had an epiphany about this game. It's Trails in the Sky the Third and Trails in a Reverie, in that it has doors and dreams that players can experience. Except this time, they are all part of the main story. This actually rationalizes a lot of the choices I've deemed strange, such as all these side characters getting crimson corruption, or these what if character death moments. I felt really good about thinking about this. I was like, holy cow, that just makes all the sense. So, uh, my criticisms of the doors in Trails in the Sky to Third or the daydreams in Trails into Reverie is if they are important and you want a player to see them, then they should be part of the main story. Otherwise, they're optional and they're not required. You don't need to watch that stuff. So I've been going through these games only watching the things that I'm interested in. But this game takes a different approach. They insert us into scenarios where they are somewhat equivalent of doors and daydreams, where we learn about these other characters and kind of maybe like these, I don't know, twisted alternate realities of how we can see them. Um, wanted to say like performing or acting, but it's not the word that I'm looking for. Um, but regardless, like how they would approach certain scenarios. And while admittedly none of them serve to push any of the plot forward or have any sort of relevance or interestingness going on, um, they are like these little side stories that I can see that makes sense if they wanted to approach it that way. Uh, unfortunately, it wasn't implemented in a way that I would have preferred because nothing was plot relevant in my opinion. But it is what it is. I'm not even sure if we got an answer as to why those people had first Genesis on them, second, why they were the ones being targeted by the Garden Master, and third, why the Garden Master even needed to do any of those um, things in the first place. Like, was he experimenting with the Crimson corruption or something like that? Um, there sure would be a lot better ways to experiment with the Crimson corruption than to manipulate people around the one person that has even the slightest chance of stopping you. Why not go target uh, Jim Bob, who's working the taco stand, and have him just raise a ruckus over there or something? I don't know. Villain strategies. This is why I can never be in a video game, because the good guys would never win. I want to say we're almost done, but we're done with the story. Uh, Gameplay mechanics and design. What gameplay elements stand out? Feels incredibly awkward to be introduced to a choose your route time travel mechanic for the first time and then completely neglect it. It would be one thing if it was teased via the story or subtly implied, but they straight up give the player a whole new menu and UI system and then ignore it until who knows when. And then right below that. Now, funnily enough, as of Act 3 Maxim arc, it's not only neglected, but it's extremely overused in the same ways. What I mean by this is that these systems of this mechanic are basically non existent, but our characters are time hopping fairly regularly or fairly often from the same triggers. It's always someone dying. So yeah, this is just one of those like weird things where it's like, why not just have us go like something weird happens on the screen and then we just reappear back at the other time, and we have to figure out, wait, what just happened? Like, it's, something weird happens, and maybe down the line after it happens, maybe like one or two more times, are we like, holy cow, like we're going back in time. And then we're presented with a system that utilizes a user interface that allows us to interact with the different timelines. Instead, it's just like, yeah, you just went back in time. Go select that time, and then in like 20 hours or so, we'll have you do it again. It's just like it didn't flow very well. It was just weird. Glad to see some user interface slash experience tweaks. They definitely make it easier to view and navigate. Yeah, I greatly appreciate this. I still think they have some work to do, but I like what they did. There's still some outliers that get in the way, such as swapping equip quartz on the same character. You can't just move their location. Instead, you have to navigate to that quartz, unequip it, and then go to the spot you want to equip or want it and equip it. It would feel much nicer if you could just get a prompt saying, swap this quartz here. Yep. And I don't know if I have this here. I'll just repeat it if I do, but we need quartz pages for everybody, like ideal quartz setups. Or I don't think I have this written down, but like being able to target specific shard skills and say, I want these shard skills for this character on these lines. That would be also very helpful. It appears we are getting to go to new areas for the main story, and side quests return to areas from the prior game. I definitely appreciate this approach more, as retreading the same locations wanes my interest. This didn't last very long, but um, in the credit of this game, they focused on that in the beginning, and then as the game progressed, we started revisiting areas that we have already been to for like other games, and it felt less worrisome, I suppose, in those moments. So really like how they approach that, because if you had me running around the same areas for the first 20 hours or whatever, I would have been in a worse spot than I am now. And who wants that? Uh, Not a great fan of the Marching Garden, but so far it appears to be completely optional, and as long as it stays that way, it's a great addition from a gameplay perspective. I have a place to grind, get cool upgrades, unlock cosmetics, and a bunch of other completely optional things. Yeah. As far as I know, there has not been any indication that the Marching Garden was required. The Marian Garten. Um, and I have no problems with optional stuff being there. And I really like that how they approached it was, hey, you can get a lot of cool stuff if you go do this. And look at me. Look how much stuff I did because it was optional and I wanted cool and awesome quartz. I do think the Mystic Cube part needs to have a function to open more than one cube. I think Trails in a Reverie had that, so it's kind of confusing to see it absent here. Yeah, the whole like gotcha mechanic thing. It's 2025. We know how to improve the gotcha mechanic. So can we just do that, please? Let's see. The stealth sections unequivocally are anti-fun, and I hope to never see them again. Not only are the mechanics of them awkward, but the gameplay is so silly. Every character has this massive circle where they automatically start detecting you, even if their back is turned. Some people aren't even people who know how to catch a tail or even know that we're following them. The meter for being detected fills up so fast, while the meter for hiding reduces the same meter so much slower. And you can lose sight of the target even if they are still visible on screen, and the meter fills up so fast. If we are following someone who just turned the corner, they aren't just going to magically vanish if we don't go to the corner in 5 seconds. At the very least, the game did not present that outcome in any scenario I did. Yeah. Uh, Honestly, I didn't even need to say all that. Just get rid of the stealth mechanic in its entirety and never try that again. It's not fun, and it never will be fun. Not a fan of the shard search slash scan function. While I appreciate the range and multiple pulses it sends out, I have never found enjoyment in repeatedly pressing a button to see invisible things. As a side note, I do like that they added the invisible shard things. I like collecting those. Yeah. Um, my in I would just like them to get rid of the shard search and just have those things appear like without having to press any buttons. Um, that's that's how I would like to see it done. Feels like it would just be better that way. While I don't think I like any of the mini games, I do like that they are in the game. They add a nice change of pace that is completely optional. Hacking treasure chest is pretty stiff and rigid with its controls. On a controller, you have to use the analog stick, even though the D-pad would be a far superior movement choice. The enemies also move faster than the player, which creates some unneeded tension. There's a severe lack of awareness of surroundings, which combined with how movement is in squares rather than units, there's just a lot of friction there. And what I mean by like movement in squares is like each movement is sectioned off into something. And so if an enemy is right in front of me and I press forward, like I am moving into that enemy no matter what. I can't just like, I don't just like take a small little step. Like I take multiple steps until I stop moving and then I can move again. So yeah, there was definitely some friction there. Basketball is also very stiff and just overall a really weird representation of the sport. I'd rather see a game of horse or just free throws. Yeah, like the person like being there and trying to block your shots. Um, if we were gonna do it that way, we might as well just have a half court 1v1 game. Like uh, I I don't know. Yeah, whatever. Fishing is in a great state. I appreciate that button mashing is gone, and actually, wish I fished more than I did. Yeah, I did not fish very much, and I kind of regret it because as soon as I started like fishing on a more regular basis, I was like, wow, like fishing is actually kind of cool. I like this iteration of fishing. I continue to be extremely confused by the card game, though. The explanation of the rules feel lacking in a big way. There needs to also be a primer on strategy because I think skipping a turn and intentionally taking damage seems to be necessary. The way the game is played feels counterintuitive to me as someone who isn't very familiar with games like this. To me, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense that after someone loses all their points, the round is over and the team can still win. Yeah, there's like, and a lot of that is just a me thing. Like the rules of the game just don't seem to match what I feel a game like this should have rules or like how the rules should work. And like I get that. The Theo vent obstacle course is okay. I'd personally rather it be hand waved. Yeah, I could do without that. Also, outside of fishing, I feel like the presentation of these mini games is crazy low. I think maybe I meant representation. Everyone and their mamas wanted to play Blade and Vantage Masters. As of Act 3, Maxim, I think I've encountered 2 basketball courts and 1 7th Hearts player, which both include the tutorial. Yeah, I I think outside of the Aramis Academy Festival, like that might have been it, which is a significant reduction. You know, like I said, everybody and their mamas wanted to play Vantage Masters, and that was cool. You got to play so many people. There were systems upon systems of Vantage Masters and finding new opponents and things like that. Um, so it's kind of strange, not only to see these new mini games implemented the way that they were, but also the severe lack of ways to do those mini games with new opponents and things like that. Super, super strange in comparison to, other Trails games representations. I really like the achievement system in this game. I liked it in the first game too. Not only do they unlock somewhat frequently, but many of them feel obtainable without a ton of effort. The achievement system in this game is fantastic. Um, I am not 100% person. I do not try to go for 100% games or platinum trophies or all the achievements. But there were just many times in this game where I'm like, you know what? I want to know what this quartz does because it seems like it could be pretty nice. And it's not going to take me a whole lot of effort to get this quartz. So I'm going to go get this quartz. And it's for someone who has the mentality that I do, it's kind of nice to have that stuff. I dig it. If we're going to keep getting these games where we have to constantly swap between a bunch of different characters, and we aren't just locked into 4 characters for the entire game, we really need to do something about quartz. I know there's an auto equip, but what we need are saved pages or profiles for individual characters. I spend something like 30 minutes at the start of new chapters moving quartz around, and it's not fun. I think I've been saying this since Trails of Cold Steel 3, and it has only gotten worse with every game since then. So, yeah, please, if you choose to ignore everything that I say except for one thing, 2 things, except for 2 things, can we get the story to move towards the climax and not fall off and mow the lawn? Like stay there at the climax and start building upon that and doing more cool things and that stuff. That one's probably the most important thing for me. But if we can get to 2 things, profile pages for quartz so that we can assign people quartz based off of the profiles that we want for them, and like it would be specific quartz for specific shard skills and all that other good stuff. It would be, oh my gosh, it's so needed. Got nothing for dungeons. For cardinal sins, removing a key party member without sufficient replacement, forcing the player to use certain party members, backup party earns less experience. This one's more of a, if there are people outside, like if there are people that you can't even have for that chapter, they just don't get any experience. That being said, the game has done a pretty decent job of bringing those characters up to level. Like I used Renee Kincaid, I think like twice, and they were required sequences. He was like level 43, and then eventually he caught up to level 50s, and I think he's in the 60s right now. So, um, it they at least recognize that and they're fixing it, or they're fixing it within the game. But yeah, just don't do that. This one's a maybe. Main story missions are side quests. This one's not a maybe. This one, that the final chapter there had that. And I don't think there are any other ones. So I'll skip that. For miscellaneous sound, for the music, I enjoyed the music from what I can recall. I feel like a lot of the tracks were the same. I don't remember a ton of variety in the tracks, but I had no problems with the Trails music. Trails music in general is a very nice thing. I find myself enjoying the soundtracks of Trails games, and I don't imagine that this one will be any worse uh, uh, once I listen to it outside of the game. For voice acting, I thought the voice acting was pretty good. There were certainly some moments that stand out a little bit, but like all the characters, they do a pretty good job. And there's just a couple of lines and things like that where it doesn't sound so great. But yeah. For graphics, I think the visuals of the game look fine. I like the visuals of the game. I do still think that the animations need work. I I would arguably say that the animations of this game got worse than the first game, but it is what it is. For other, if it's a sequel, does it achieve more of the same? I would say it does, which is something that I look for in sequels. Is the game worth recommending? Uh, I'll keep it 100. I am not recommending someone play Trails Through Daybreak 2 unless they are, an established Trails fan. And maybe even then, that's not if you play Trails games and you talk to all the NPCs and you read all the side quests and um and yeah, that's probably the bar right there. If you do all those things, play this one. It'll be exactly what you want. If you find yourself skipping dialogue, if you find yourself just, I don't want to say rushing to complete things, but you know, um, uh, just kind of doing what's required, then I wouldn't recommend this one. I would not recommend this one to me. And if the developer is watching, uh, I basically have the same criticisms from the first game. I think there's an interesting combat. I think I skipped over combat. I I totally did. Well, let me swap back over to combat. Uh, Combat still has some enjoyable moments, but my criticisms of the system in the first game are largely still present. It's weird to have two different combat systems, and the story and boss battles only let you do one of those combat systems. Final boss broke this trend for one fight, but it was cool and it caught me by surprise, and I had no idea what was going on, and I liked it. So, um, I'd like to see that more, and done in cool and clever ways, not just like the same as the way the final boss did this, and like for every boss, but like some boss, like you can exploit this and do interesting things. Um, like the boss goes away and these little like towers come up, and you got to use the art things on the towers to bring the boss down, and all the while like these enemies are spawning, and like you could do some cool things to shake up the combat and and bring the Daybreak combat system to be its own unique thing. Like, what combats? I don't think there's any games out there where you're playing a quote turn-based game and then you break out of that turn-based game or turn-based combat system into an action RPG combat system, and you do all of these objectives so that you can get back into the turn-based system. Like, the thought of that just sounds so cool, and I hope y'all do some more with that. The S-Craft change is also not my favorite. I get it that they've gone or gotten too strong and have historically been too strong, but the change just feels less fun. Yeah. Look, it's really nice to just cast an S-Craft and you hit somebody for 1 billion damage, and you're like, you know what? I need to do that again. And then you just do that again. And you just do 1 billion damage again. But you can't do that in this game. And it doesn't it doesn't have the same uh like highs as some of the other games. Um it's but like on one hand I get it. On the other hand, it's like we could really uh let's find a different way to like if we think S crafts are too strong, maybe the approach is not trying to limit S crafts. It's trying to bring up some other things so that S crafts are not so high and above like one of the most valuable options. Maybe we can bring up some party options or enemy options, stuff like that. Make S crafts a little bit more risky to use. And then the last thing for combat, I think I like the implementation of cross charge, where if you perfectly dodge, you can swap characters for bonus damage. It's a pretty small thing in the grand scheme of things, but it's nice. I agree with that. So back to if the developer is watching. Yeah, I think a lot of my criticisms of the first game still carry over to this game. Um, I still want more focus on the story. Um, I do appreciate the significant reduction in mowing the lawn for this game, and uh, if as hesitant as I am to say this, I think you guys are on the right track. You found an interesting time travel mechanic here, and some of its utilizations explored some very fascinating things that the Trails games have never done before. And I would like to see how that's iterated on in the future, as far as exploring, these things that Trails games are not typically associated with, or even joked about for not having them or completely avoiding them or whatever. Um, yeah, I think that's pretty much where I'm at. I certainly think that there are a lot of improvements that can be had, um, and I think at like when it comes down to it, I think the characters, I would like to see the characters utilized differently. But at the end of the day, you created another Trails game, and it does the Trails games things. I don't think this game has lost the Trails game magic, despite it being, I don't know, what are we at, like 10, 9, 11 Trails games now? So I think that's all I have for my thoughts. To reiterate my overall thoughts, I think the game itself is fine. It's another Trails game. It tries new things, and I give it probably way more props for trying new things than I should. But I ultimately did not enjoy playing the game. And so it's like, do I want to play Trails Through Daybreak 3? Not really. I was pretty good at not playing a Trails game for the rest of my life after Reverie. And I still feel that way. Um, but then again, I'm told that Trails Through Daybreak 3 has been voted in Japan to be the greatest game in all of existence, and no game can ever come close to it. So, with a glowing review like that, while also saying that I do not deserve to play any Trails games anymore because I do not talk to all the NPCs, um, you know, how could I not just try out Trails Through Daybreak 3 and see what the best game in existence has to offer? I don't know. But anyways, I already saved, so let's see what happens next. Okay. So no secret, no secret thingamabobbers. No no secret cutscenes. I don't know. I'll watch Mr. JRPG's. And he beat the game yesterday, I'm pretty sure. And he does everything. So if there was a secret cutscene, I'll find out about it and I'll watch it. But anyways, thanks for watching. Appreciate it. I will not be streaming tomorrow because I beat a game on a Thursday. So I'll be back Monday, 7 a.m. Pacific time, to uh, continue playing video games because I'll be playing a different video game. Will it be a viewer requested game, or will it be a game of my choosing? We will find out then. But with that, see ya the next time I see ya. Peace.